Met 3 componisten aan tafel waarvan vanavond werk wordt uitgevoerd. En een van de componisten is zenuwachtig genoeg om de fles erbij te pakken. Met de Glen Tellach.
Oh yeah.
That's not a bad sort of Scotch at all.
It's not so bad.
No, it's cool.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, good one.
Oké. De 3 componisten die we aan tafel hebben zijn Benjamin Scheuer, van wie vanavond werk gaat Maxim Shalygin, if I pronounce the name
exactly.
correctly, Shalygin, en Edward Hamel from the United States. Well, I'm glad you're here. Thank you so much for dropping by. So, of all 3 of you, a work will be performed tonight by the ensemble Insomnio. Could you please tell a bit about your work? Who wants to start? Benjamin?
Yeah, I can start.
Okay.
Yeah, I think my work is the smallest instrumentation. It's just 2 players. It's clarinet and piano. So I don't work with conductor and just with 2 very good musicians. I had enjoyed the rehearsals very much, and it was a very interesting process. But there's also some other things involved. It's not just for clarinet and piano. There's radio, which has a different role. There's walkie-talkies, and there's a lot of conversations which have like an installation-like character, which also take place in the piece. So there's a lot of surprising things which are maybe not the typical clarinet piano thing.
Okay. And Maxim, is your piece also that small?
No, not with this ensemble.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's gonna be performed tonight at 10 o'clock.
Oh yeah, in the second concert tonight.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
With Sammy Storms, with this amazing violin player. She's unbelievably good. And the pieces, I think, is even the smallest instrumentation is like 1 violin.
All right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think it's actually the longest piece of all the composers, all the nominated composers.
All right.
It's 27 minutes.
Oh wow.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so I'm not doing squashing there.
Yeah.
I'm doing something else there. We'll see what's gonna happen. It's what can I say? It's just extremely difficult piece. It wasn't on purpose, but Emmy said me that not everyone can play it. And so I'm not sure that I can say something really very important about the piece, but
is it difficult because of the number of notes, or the speed, or the positions of?
We talked about it with Emmy, and we decided that it's probably, of course, it's a lot of stuff there. It's like microtones. It's sometimes on 2 staves and some really fast stuff, which is incredibly fast sometimes. But we decided that the most difficult thing is to play from the beginning until the end without losing concentration, because when you lose it, then the piece is going down and down. Okay. And the pieces build it up completely different way from all the classical, let's say composition that's in this field.
Yeah.
So
in what way is it different?
It's about form. I think the very interesting thing in the piece that it's written in a very strange way, because the form of the piece it's only about variations, but not 1 variation, but there are I think 7 or 8, or I don't remember the number of variations, but on the different themes. But in one point they are connected with each other. So the difficulty is that the piece is building up more and more, let's say, aggressive until the end, very gradually raising tension in the piece. This is the most difficult for her. I guess, I don't know. You can ask her what the most difficult is.
Is form an important issue in your piece as well, Edward?
I'm sorry?
Is form an important issue in your piece as well?
I wouldn't it's not necessarily the main focus of the piece, but the form, it's important, in all my work, really. It's been always taken into consideration and try to make things unique. My piece, I think, is more concerned. It's a very generic way of saying, but my piece is more concerned with these sort of these colors of sound and these things like that, and these these harmonic ideas and these things, sort of slow morphology, these things happening.
And for your piece, the whole Insomnia ensemble is
Yeah, it's for alto flute, English horn, baritone saxophone, violin, viola, cello, bass. But yeah, they've been working with them. It's been fantastic. They understood the piece right off. As soon as I walked in the door, and the rehearsals have been, nothing but productive.
Mm-hmm.
So, but it's a strange piece, I think, just for me.
Strange.
Yeah, it was inspired by a painting from Marcel Duchamp called "Nude Descending Stairs," and so the idea that what I liked with the painting, I guess, is that we have time. In painting, we can sit and we can stare at a painting for a long period of time in this sort of static frame and this kind of thing. But in this work, he shows movement and he shows temporality and time and things like that. In music, we don't really have this luxury all the time because music sort of happens obviously linearly. It just happens in time. Yeah. So sometimes you don't have time to change perspectives. You can't really revisit a sound over and over again at your leisure because it's there and then it's gone. Mm-hmm. So there's certain things it's the challenge of the piece was trying to create variation and movement and stasis. So there's a lot of this sort of repetition is a big part of the piece, but it's not always the same. It's changing each time it comes back in and out of these things. Yeah.
Okay. Is the issue of the fact that music is limited to a linear experiencing only because it takes place in time? Is that something which is a concern for a composer? For instance, do you think of what can I do to make people remember what I did? For instance, using video or other visual elements or theatrical aspects? Is that something which you consider important to involve in your music? Or should music just be listened to through the years? Period.
I think it's obviously you want people to remember your pieces, right? People to remember your music, But for me, I think it's more. I like music or moments in music when I don't really understand what's happening, where there's these strange sounds or these strange things, but I get a sense that something's happening, and then I really try to have that in my music. But I don't think it's for me. I don't like using video and using these other mediums. I've seen many pieces that have these things, but. I can't, but off the top of my head, I can't think of any of them. So I think sometimes having these extra things doesn't necessarily make it more interesting, the performance, but hopefully you can convey it in your music.
I think it really depends on the piece.
It does, absolutely. Yeah.
It can be very dangerous in a way. I think it's overused in many pieces. Yeah. Like my music is absolutely theatrical. My music has a narrative, so I'm not like. Composing soundscapes, but I'm always going from A to B to C, and for me the form is very important, and I always want to surprise the listener at a certain point, like building up maybe expectations and how the form might evolve, and then at a certain point just break with it or come with something totally different. But I also work a lot with memory. I'm a composer who I would always introduce small bits of music, and they would come again and again and again. You will hear that in my piece very well, that there's bits which come in. It's the material is actually very reduced, and the idea is more, of course, for me, the two concerns are to find very interesting material which is very unique and which is surprising, as you said, something which strikes you just by what it is. But the second thing is then that's not enough. You have to find out a way how to use that material in a very striking and surprising way, and that's the main concern of the piece. And if you manage to do that with not that much material, it's even more a success than just doing it with a lot. So my piece does have a lot of visual elements in a way. I even worked on it with a director when I first composed it. So I would sit down with the director, and I didn't have any musical ideas, and we just knew that it's going to be clarinet and piano. We talked about it, and then we just made a brainstorming as if we were doing a music theater or something. We collected ideas, and that's how we came to the title, which was Fratzen, which is let's say maybe grimaces, like the faces you make. And we had an idea of a topic that the piece is about imitation and about the fact that people don't really manage to imitate themselves perfectly. It's about communication, but how communication can also fail. That's the main idea of the piece, and this is what came up before I even thought about any music. And then with this concept, I started to look for musical material which I could use to have those imitations which don't really work, and to create a form with it. And so it's very visual, it's very theatrical, of course.
I think you're mentioning working with sort of a limited amount of material kind of thing. I think that's important, at least in my music, a lot of contemporary music that I hear, it's difficult to navigate through sometimes because the form, that you're using is very unique or unconventional forms, and it's interesting, but sometimes you get sort of lost. You're in a piece, it's 30 minutes long or something, and there's all these instruments, so sometimes I kind of drift, and I have nothing to hold on to.
Or sometimes you have a piece 30 minutes long length, and then in the program you see that it's just 12.
Yeah, it's just.
Yeah,
no, absolutely, and because things like that, you can't. For me, it's hard to navigate. I don't have any sense of, I don't know where I am in the piece, but I think, for me in my music, maybe that's something maybe that's what's sort of traditional or conventional about my music, is that I always try to work with a sort of, very limited economical means of material, and always make sure to have these sounds come back in the initial way they were heard, and I think that's a very,
No, your point is, like, when the musicians asked me how long the piece was, and I told them it's 13 minutes, they was like, I didn't believe that, it's like 9 minutes. That was really a compliment, I felt, because they had the feeling, so, like, and I think also, I don't know how your piece works, I would be interested in, like, because you have this huge form, for me it would be really difficult, like, if my piece is so much about narrative that if there's a break and a gap and it doesn't work anymore, dramatically, it failed in a way, for me. So I don't do a soundscape, that's not what I'm interested in, but I also accept pieces very much which aim for creating a soundscape, but it's just a totally different attitude of listening. I would be interested in what you...
I don't know about soundscape at all. I think I'm just interested, really. I'm into the big forms. I just had to... yesterday, I think, it was this night for one piece which was 56 minutes. It's a tape piece, but it's still, and I have a lot of pieces like 30 minutes now, 27, something like that. But the thing is, in this piece, for solo one, and when this guy, one of the guys in Ukraine, he asked me, can you write a piece? Amazing violin player, of course, because he's just amazing, And then I started to work, but immediately I said it's not gonna be easy, and it's gonna be long, because I found it stupid in a way write a piece for violin solo in 4 minutes. Of course, it's possible, 4 minutes, 1 minute. I just thought in that moment I thought because I realized I listened to a lot of music for violin solo, and I realized that after Bach, for instance, partitas, it's you hardly can find something which you. I'm not talking about level, but I'm talking about how people work with this instrument, how they. I don't know. It's really hard to explain, but it's also about the instrument from one side. From another side, it's about the form and how you build up the form with just one violin. And that I found exciting. It's a real challenge. And I just get this challenge and I tried what to do. I spent like I think one and a half year to write this piece.
Wow.
1.5 years?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
That's quite long. But for 30 minutes, of course.
Yeah, 1.5 years.
It takes a lot of work.
Exactly. Yeah. But one in solo, it's like I don't know. It's in some places you just stuck for several months and you don't understand how to move further the form. You can't understand it. And then after a few months you got, that was so simple. That's how it works. And like Stravinsky said, we just have to wait sometimes. Right?
It's true.
As long as it's needed.
Does a piece sort of write itself, or is a piece the result of what's happening in your mind, an idea, a schedule, a discipline? This is what I want it to be. And you know beforehand what it's going to be.
I don't think that it's so easy. I think it's much more complicated. I mean, that the creative process in a way is much more complicated because we usually want something and then we receive something else which have connection with that what we wanted, but still it's something different. But it doesn't mean that it's bad.
It depends very much on the composer, I think, and on the attitude you have. Like, I would say I'm a quite fast composer. I write quite a lot because I have my writing is very intuitive in a certain way. And for me, it's very important that at the point when I actually write the piece, that it just flows. Like when I write on a piece for a year, it's not getting as good as if I write on it for a week. I have the impression, like when I compared, I tried everything, and for me it works better to do it quite quickly. But what's very important then is to do a lot of pre-work, to prepare your material, so that you have a field in which you can improvise, and then have this freedom to just write the piece and get the flow. And it takes me a long time to prepare this field. And it can also be like other pieces I did before, which kind of give me the idea how this field could work. But it depends very much on the way how you're working on your personality.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Maybe just one more question before you have to go off to the rehearsal. What would you say was the main influence which made you decide, I want to be a composer? Edward, was there a specific thing which made you decide, I'm going to be a composer?
Now I have to think back. Well, I guess it wasn't that long ago. I was, in my younger years, I was always playing in bands and rock music and this kind of thing. And at the time, I was sort of naive, and I didn't know that you could, to me, being a composer, it was like sort of the kind of classical era. You had to sound like, Mozart or Haydn. Kind of. I think I heard the music of Morton Feldman, and it wasn't necessarily that I wanted to write music like that, but it was more that it sort of gave me permission. Sort of like, wow, this is something, people can hear this type of music and hear these types of, sounds and these textures and things, and they're composers, and that's great. And I just thought, I guess it was more. I've always been writing songs, but I never thought I wasn't, allowed to be considered a composer until, I don't know, I guess I've only been doing this for like 5 years or something like that. I'm a youngin'.
All of the composers in the Gaudeamus Muziekweek are young, so most of you are.
Many have more experience than I do, though. Much more experience, which is great. It's good to hear, to share ideas and things like that, from different perspectives.
Yeah. Well, Morton Feldman is one hell of a starting point, of course. He is great. Talking about long and big forms.
Exactly.
Yeah. Do you have a similar starting point for your compositional motivation, Maxim?
Not really. I think because it wasn't like point. It was several years when I started like a bayan player, and then I started to write music just for myself. And then I played this music on the competitions, and it was kind of quite typical bayan music. I was lucky. I got a very nice teacher, probably because of that. I never met a teacher like this. I studied in St. Petersburg, I studied in Kiev after that, I studied then here in the Netherlands. I met a lot of nice teachers and amazing professionals, but that teacher who I started with, she's just amazing. She's like, she lives in the small city where I'm born, and she learned me everything what I can do now. So that was, I think, the kind of point, because I studied with her for 4 years, and she turned me to the composition, and she formed in a way my musical taste, my taste for films, for drawings, for all of kind of arts, and I think this is fantastic. I'm not sure that I will. It's like one of my favorite film directors said that, Marco Ferreri. He said that in order to make each next film good, it has to be better than the previous one. And all of my films are amazing, and that makes all of my films are amazing. And further and further, it become more and more difficult to make something really something natural. I don't know, something very important, and probably I will start to draw. So you never know. Probably in one day we will start compose and we will make films or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah. And for you, Benjamin, did you have a starting point?
I can agree very much on this interdisciplinary approach. Like for me, when I was very, very young, and I started very young as to compose, and to write notes on a piece of paper, which you can discuss whether that is composing. But I was like interested in creativity in general. I'm a very bad painter, but when I was in kindergarten, I would paint. I would do my own theater pieces. I would ask my friends from kindergarten to perform a theater piece, whatever. I didn't care at all about what kind of art it was just about expression. And so when I started to learn my first recorder notes, I would immediately compose my own pieces in first grade. They are not interesting at all, it's just notes written on paper, but it was always about creativity for me, and I would, in any field I would get to know, I would try to be creative and do my own thing. I was never interested in practicing the piano for 4 hours a day. I'm not a very good piano player because I did never practice. I rather wanted to write my own pieces, and so I think the key thing was when I first saw an opera. Okay. Because this was a thing where all those arts came together. It was exactly the field where I wanted to work. Because and I immediately started to write my operas. I would write my own libretto, and it was like when I was in 4th grade, and it was like those stupid children's stories. But it was always about combining all art forms. And then later on I found out that I wasn't good at painting, I wasn't the best storyteller, so the thing I should probably specialize on to be later on part of larger opera projects was to be a composer. And then I only started to listen to chamber music. I wasn't interested in that at all when I was younger. So, but it's the way my final goal in 20 years to arrive somewhere where I can write large operas again, or not operas, music theaters, like what you nowadays do. But just to being a composer is such a lonely thing. You're always on your desk, and this is why, for example, I worked with the director to do the piece, because I think you have to have somebody to discuss with. You need a team. This is so great about music theater, that you always work in a team and that you're not a lonesome introverted, because that's not my personality. I always need people. I also need people around. So this is what I'm mostly interested in music theater, probably, because that's kind of the key element for me to become a composer.
Well, we're looking forward to all of your pieces tonight in 2 concerts here in Utrecht. Thank you so much for your comments. Thank you all. Thank you.